On a warm June night in Boston, as confetti rained down on the TD Garden floor, one player stood out not because of his flash, but because of what he represented: Andrew Wiggins. The quiet Canadian forward, once labeled overrated, had just delivered the game of his life. 26 points, 13 rebounds, and perhaps the biggest "I told you so" in recent NBA history. But rewind the tape a few years, and the narrative was very different. He was called Maple Jordan, a phenom out of Canada with freakish athleticism and sky-high expectations, the #1 overall pick, a max contract guy, the supposed franchise savior for the Timberwolves, and then nothing. Year after year, Wiggins' name became synonymous with apathy, underachievement, and wasted potential. He was the punchline in trade rumors, the cautionary tale for what happens when hype doesn't meet heart. Fans gave up, analysts mocked him, teammates questioned his desire, empty stats, no motor, soft. He heard it all. So how did he go from being a national disappointment to the second best player on a championship team? That's the story we're about to tell. Because Andrew Wiggins didn't change the narrative with a single dunk or buzzer beater. He flipped it slowly, piece by piece, through quiet growth, defensive hustle, and a level of humility rarely seen in players of his pedigree. This isn't a fairy tale. It's a grind, a redemption arc sculpted in silence. If you've ever been labeled not good enough, if you've ever felt like you weren't living up to expectations, this story is for you. Because sometimes the greatest victories aren't loud. They're earned in the shadows, far from the spotlight. This is the untold resurrection of Andrew Wiggins. Before the doubts, before the criticism, before the whispers of bust, there was only belief, unshakable, undeniable belief. Andrew Wiggins wasn't just a top basketball prospect. He was the basketball prospect born on the 23rd of February in Toronto, Ontario. Andrew came from elite athletic stock. His father, Mitchell Wiggins, played in the NBA. His mother, Tatum Wiggins, was an Olympic sprinter and medalist. Athleticism wasn't something Andrew had to chase. It was in his blood. But it wasn't just the genes, it was the way he moved. By the time he was a teenager, Andrew had already begun to pull in attention from across the border. His rare blend of fluid motion, a 6'8" frame, and spring-loaded leaping ability turned heads early at Vaughan Secondary School in Ontario. He dominated the Canadian high school scene. It was clear this kid wasn't just good for a Canadian, he was a legitimate future NBA star. To refine his game and gain more exposure, Wiggins made a move that changed everything. He transferred to Huntington Prep in West Virginia. That's where the legend started to really build. Suddenly, he was playing in the heart of American hoops culture. And he wasn't just surviving, he was destroying the competition. He became a YouTube sensation overnight. Mixtapes of his thunderous dunks, silky smooth pull-up jumpers, and effortless chase-down blocks went viral. Basketball forums dubbed him Maple Jordan, a nickname meant to capture the kind of generational greatness people saw in him. Slam magazine put him on the cover. ESPN labeled him the #1 high school prospect in the country. NBA scouts were already salivating, and he wasn't even in college yet. He committed to the University of Kansas. The hype train reached full throttle. His one season as a Jayhawk was appointment television. Crowds packed arenas just to get a glimpse of this Canadian sensation. Wiggins averaged over 17 points per game and added nearly 6 rebounds, all while showing flashes of brilliance on both ends of the floor. While he wasn't perfect, his passive stretches raised some eyebrows. His talent was too overwhelming to ignore. The 2014 NBA draft was coming, and there was no debate. Andrew Wiggins was the #1 overall pick. The Cleveland Cavaliers took him first, though not with the intent to keep him. Just weeks after the draft, the Cavs pulled off a blockbuster trade. Wiggins and Anthony Bennett were sent to the Minnesota Timberwolves in exchange for Kevin Love. It was a move designed to accelerate Cleveland's championship window alongside LeBron James and Kyrie Irving. But for Wiggins, it meant something entirely different. He went from being a rookie learning alongside veterans to becoming the centerpiece of a rebuilding franchise overnight. Minnesota was desperate for hope, and they believed Wiggins could be that. From day one, he was handed the keys. No easing into the NBA, no slow build. He was expected to carry, and at first, it looked like he just might. Wiggins won Rookie of the Year in 2015. He averaged over 16 points a game and showed signs of becoming a future star. His calm demeanor, effortless scoring, and ability to create his own shot gave Timberwolves fans something to dream about. Alongside fellow young talents like Karl Anthony Towns and Zach LaVine, Minnesota was starting to build a new identity. The following season, he bumped his scoring average to 20 points, then 23, then just under 24. From a purely statistical standpoint, he was ascending. The Timberwolves even gave him a massive 5-year, $147 million contract extension, clearly betting on his potential turning into production. And yet, something wasn't clicking. Despite his athletic gifts, Wiggins often seemed disengaged on defense. His effort fluctuated. He'd put up 27 points one night, then disappear the next. Critics started pointing out that his stats weren't translating to wins. The Wolves kept missing the playoffs. The max contract became a target. Every lackluster game became a referendum on whether he was worth the money. Still, during these years, Wiggins showed flashes of brilliance. He hit game winners. He had 30-plus point outbursts. He was still only in his early 20s. And yet the narrative was slowly shifting from future all-star to empty stats guy. The pressure was enormous. Being a number one pick comes with expectations. Being labeled the next big thing multiplies that tenfold. Add in the trade, the max deal, and the losing, and you have a cocktail built for scrutiny. Still, if you looked past the headlines and the sound bites, there was something there. Coaches and teammates consistently praised his professionalism. He didn't complain. He didn't demand trades. He kept his head down and worked. He played a lot, missing very few games across those early seasons. But the NBA is a league of narratives, and once yours becomes disappointment, it's hard to shake. By 2019, the noise around Wiggins was deafening. Pundits openly questioned whether he cared. Jimmy Butler, known for his intensity, reportedly clashed with Wiggins during his brief time in Minnesota, adding fuel to the fire. National media used his name as shorthand for unmet potential. It felt like the basketball world had moved on. A new wave of stars, Luka, Dončić, Trae Young, Jayson Tatum were taking over the league. And Wiggins, he was fading into irrelevance. Then came the trade that would change everything. In February 2020, Wiggins was dealt to the Golden State Warriors in exchange for D'Angelo Russell. At the time, it barely made headlines. The Warriors were at the bottom of the standings due to injuries. Many assumed Wiggins was just a placeholder, someone to fill a roster spot until Steph and Clay returned. No one expected a career resurrection, but in that moment, something important happened for the first time in his NBA life. Andrew Wiggins didn't have to be the guy. He wasn't carrying a franchise. He was joining a system, a culture, a team that knew who they were and what they needed from him. And Wiggins, he listened, he adapted, he began to rewrite his story, not with noise, but with nuance, not with flashy stats, but with fundamentals. The rise of Andrew Wiggins wasn't some one-time leap. It was a slow, deliberate climb. One that began with extraordinary promise, took a detour through doubt, and was about to head into redemption, because sometimes Rising isn't about proving others wrong right away. It's about staying steady, staying ready, and waiting for the right moment to remind the world who you really are. Winning Rookie of the Year usually sets the tone for greatness. For Andrew Wiggins, it felt like the first and last time the basketball world universally agreed on his potential. His early NBA years were loaded with promise, highlight dunks, clutch moments, and scoring consistency. But behind the box scores, cracks were beginning to show, and once the narrative turned, it turned fast. What started as whispers of inconsistency quickly escalated into a storm of disappointment. The thing about being drafted #1 overall is that you don't just play basketball. You carry a franchise's hopes. You become the face of a rebuild. Every missed shot, every defensive lapse, every quiet fourth quarter becomes a conversation. Wiggins had the physical gifts, but people started questioning everything else. His motor, his mentality, his leadership. By his third season, Wiggins was averaging over 23 points per game. On paper, it looked like he was taking off, but the advanced stats told a different story. His shooting efficiency was below average. He rarely got to the free throw line. His defense was erratic at best. And the Timberwolves kept losing. In fact, during Wiggins' first 5 seasons, Minnesota had just 1 playoff appearance and it lasted only 5 games. That lone playoff run in 2018 should have been a step forward. Instead, it highlighted the gap between Wiggins and greatness. The Wolves were manhandled by the Rockets. Wiggins disappeared when it mattered most, averaging just 15 points per game on pedestrian shooting numbers. Once again, the critics got louder. Then came the Jimmy Butler saga. Butler had been brought in to provide leadership and a winning culture, but he didn't exactly mesh with the young core. In one infamous practice, Butler reportedly destroyed the starting unit using third stringers and made sure everyone in the gym knew it. Reports swirled that Butler screamed at coaches, called out teammates, and walked out. It was chaos, and Wiggins was right in the middle of it. To many, that moment symbolized the biggest problem with the Timberwolves: talented young players who didn't want it enough. Butler later implied that some of his teammates lacked drive. Wiggins didn't respond publicly, but the damage was done. Fans and analysts alike began labeling him as soft, apathetic, and uncoachable. It wasn't just unfair, it was damning. Once that perception stuck, it colored everything Wiggins did. A quiet personality became a red flag. Missed defensive rotations became evidence of laziness. Passive fourth quarters became proof that he didn't have the dog in him. Suddenly, every flaw was magnified, and every strength ignored. The weight of expectations became heavier with each passing season, and then came the contract. In 2017, Minnesota gave Wiggins a 5-year, $147 million max extension. On the surface, it made sense. He was young, athletic, and had shown signs of growth, but in hindsight, that contract became the anchor that dragged his reputation deeper underwater. Now, Wiggins wasn't just underwhelming, he was overpaid. Every underperformance came with a dollar sign attached. He's not worth the max. He's stealing money. You can't win with Andrew Wiggins. These were the headlines. These were the tweets. The pressure mounted. And Wiggins, he didn't fight it. He didn't give passionate interviews. He didn't clap back on social media. He just played, but playing wasn't enough. Because in the NBA, silence isn't always golden. It's misunderstood. It gets labeled as indifference, and Wiggins' calm, laid-back demeanor didn't translate well in a league built on fiery personalities and killer instinct. He didn't snarl, he didn't scream, he didn't chase cameras, but people wanted him to. In 2019, the Wolves were floundering again. Karl Anthony Towns was growing frustrated. The roster was a mess. And Wiggins, still putting up around 20 points a game, was now being openly shopped in trade talks. His value had plummeted. Teams saw the contract, saw the effort lapses, and stayed away. He wasn't just failing to meet expectations. He had become the poster boy for what happens when talent isn't enough. Even his moments of brilliance couldn't shift the tide. He'd have the occasional 30-point night, he'd posterize a defender or hit a game winner. But those highs only made the lows more confusing. Why can't he do this all the time? Why is he coasting? Coaches tried to spark something. They challenged him. They shifted his role. They gave him the green light, but nothing seemed to stick. Fans called him Empty Stats Wiggins. Commentators joked that he was asleep out there. Every season felt like a rerun. And then came the trade. In February 2020, Minnesota dealt Andrew Wiggins a future first-round pick and a second-rounder to the Golden State Warriors in exchange for D'Angelo Russell, Jacob Evans, and Omari Spellman. It was seen as a win for the Wolves. They were getting a friend of Towns, a spark plug guard, a fresh start for the Warriors. The trade felt like a stopgap. Klay Thompson was injured. Steph Curry was sidelined. The dynasty was on pause. And Wiggins, he was just salary filler, a placeholder, a project. NBA Twitter had a field day. Wiggins in Golden State. He'll fade even faster. They'll regret this in a month. They just took on the worst contract in the league. Once again, the noise was deafening. But this time, something was different. Wiggins wasn't being asked to lead. He wasn't the face of the franchise. He was no longer the number one guy or even the number two in Golden State. He was just another piece. A guy who needed to defend, hit open shots, and play within the system. And for the first time in his career, the pressure was off, but the damage of the past still lingered. Years of criticism had etched doubt into the public perception. Wiggins' name had become synonymous with disappointment. His legacy was, by all accounts, written. He was a bust. Maybe not in the Anthony Bennett sense, but in the he'll never be what we thought he'd be sense. It's strange how fast the league moves on, how quickly potential becomes a punchline. Wiggins was only 24 when he was traded to Golden State, barely older than some incoming rookies. But to many, his window had already closed. He was done, and yet, beneath the surface, something was beginning to change. In a quiet gym in San Francisco, in practices with Steve Kerr, in film sessions with Ron Adams, in late-night texts with Draymond Green, Wiggins was relearning. He was listening more, working smarter, defending harder. The expectations were gone, but the fire wasn't. For the first time, Andrew Wiggins was building something not based on hype, but on habits, not on potential, but on purpose, because sometimes the fall isn't the end. Sometimes it's where the real story begins. When Andrew Wiggins arrived in San Francisco, it felt like a move made out of necessity, not belief. The Warriors needed to unload D'Angelo Russell and fill roster spots. The Timberwolves were eager to reunite Karl Anthony Towns with his close friend, and Wiggins, he was just the contract that made the math work. No parades, no welcome party, no expectations. The headlines weren't kind. Wiggins won't last long in Golden State. Bad fit. Trade bait. His name became attached to every future hypothetical deal. Giannis, Wiggins would be part of the package. Bradley Beal, ship Wiggins out. Ben Simmons, include Wiggins and some picks. To most analysts, his presence on the Warriors was a countdown, just a matter of time. But inside Chase Center, a different story was beginning to unfold. Steve Kerr and the Warriors coaching staff didn't see Wiggins as a broken player. They saw a guy who had never been properly coached, a high-level athlete who had been forced to carry a losing team from day one, a player with the tools, he just needed a system, Golden State had structure, culture, accountability, and perhaps most importantly, a clearly defined role. Wiggins was told from day one, we don't need you to be a 25-point scorer. We need you to defend, rebound, slash, hit open shots, do the dirty work. No more being the guy. Just be a guy and be elite at it. That shift changed everything. At first, the transformation was subtle. In the COVID-shortened 2020-21 season, Wiggins averaged 18 points per game and played solid defense, nothing flashy. But something felt different. He wasn't pressing, he wasn't forcing, he looked comfortable, and Warriors fans noticed, for the first time in years, Wiggins wasn't being blamed, he was being appreciated. Then came the 2021-22 season, with Klay Thompson finally back, Steph Curry at full strength, and Draymond Green anchoring the defense. The Warriors were whole again. And Wiggins, he wasn't just blending in, he was excelling. He started guarding the opposing team's best wing every night, whether it was Jayson Tatum, Luka Dončić, Paul George, or Devin Booker. And he did it well. He chased, he contested, he rotated, he hustled, things that critics once said he'd never do, now he was doing them every night. Offensively, he picked his spots, he ran the lanes, he cut hard, he hit threes, and he didn't need 30 shots to get 20 points. He was efficient, decisive, and in rhythm. More importantly, he was dependable. And then the league started to take notice. In January 2022, Andrew Wiggins was named an NBA All-Star starter. To some, it was a joke. To others, a PR win fueled by K-pop fans voting him in after Warriors player ambassador Bam Bam's campaign. But to his teammates and the people actually watching him, it was deserved, because for the first time, Wiggins was playing winning basketball. Real, meaningful, team-first basketball. He wasn't padding stats. He wasn't fading away in big moments. He was playing defense, hitting timely shots, and sacrificing for the greater good. He was doing what champions do. When the playoffs arrived, most assumed Wiggins would fade into the background. The Warriors had Steph, they had Klay, they had Draymond, but as each series unfolded, Wiggins kept showing up and showing out. In the second round against the Grizzlies, he became the tone setter. He threw down one of the most violent dunks of the postseason on Brandon Clark, a poster that made jaws drop and sent Twitter into a frenzy. The old Wiggins athleticism was back, but this time it had purpose. In the Western Conference Finals, Wiggins drew the toughest assignment, Luka Dončić. The Maverick star had torched the league all year and was coming off a monster series against Phoenix. Everyone expected Luka to feast, but Wiggins had other plans. He hounded Luka for 48 minutes every night. He fought through screens. He bodied him up. He made him work for every shot, and though Luka still got his numbers, they came with blood, sweat, and fatigue. Wiggins didn't stop him, but he made life hell. Oh, and Wiggins also averaged nearly 19 points and 7 rebounds in that series. Quietly, consistently. By the time the finals rolled around, Wiggins had gone from just a role player to the Warriors' second most important piece. Against Boston, he elevated again. He shadowed Jayson Tatum, the Celtics' best player, fresh off a dominant playoff run. Tatum came into the finals on a tear. Wiggins met him at every turn. He cut off drives. He forced contested shots. He denied passing lanes. Tatum shot under 40% from the field and committed more turnovers than assists. Wiggins was the reason why. And in Game 5, with Steph Curry struggling and the Warriors needing a hero, Wiggins delivered 26 points, 13 rebounds, lockdown defense, all in a pivotal swing game that put Golden State up 3-2 He didn't do it with flash. He didn't need a post-game rant. He just played his game. Quiet, focused, relentless. The same guy people had written off as soft. The same guy who didn't care. The same guy they traded away for spare parts. That guy was now out playing all NBA wings on the biggest stage in basketball. And when the final buzzer sounded in Game 6, when the confetti fell and the Warriors were champions, once again it was Wiggins who stood out. Not because he craved the spotlight, but because he earned it. Steph Curry was the Finals MVP. Deservedly. But ask any Warriors fan who the second best player was, and they'll say it without hesitation. Andrew Wiggins. He was the glue, the defensive anchor, the silent assassin. No one saw it coming. Except maybe Wiggins himself, because while the world was doubting him, mocking him, writing him off, he was working not on his brand, not on his image, but on his game, in the shadows, in silence. He didn't need revenge. He just needed an opportunity. And when Golden State gave him that, he didn't just fit in, he became essential. That's the turning point. Not a viral dunk, not a press conference, not a highlight reel, but a commitment to something bigger than himself, a role, a purpose, a team. Wiggins stopped trying to be what everyone wanted him to be and became exactly what his team needed. And in doing so, he changed his story forever. Andrew Wiggins' story isn't just about a comeback. It's about redefinition. Reinvention, a reminder that growth doesn't follow a deadline and greatness doesn't always shout. In the modern NBA, we're obsessed with instant results. We celebrate rookies who drop 30 on opening night. We crown superstars before they've finished their first season. And if a player doesn't live up to the hype by year 2, we move on. Wiggins was a victim of that culture. From the moment he was labeled Maple Jordan, expectations became armor he was never taught to wear. He didn't choose the hype. It was handed to him by scouts, media, fans, and even brands looking for the next global face. He wasn't just expected to succeed, he was expected to dominate immediately, constantly, loudly. But what happens when you're built for the long game? Wiggins has always been quiet, reserved. He doesn't thrive off drama. He doesn't live for the spotlight. And in a league that often equates intensity with outbursts, his calm was mistaken for apathy. Yet behind the calm, he was evolving. His years in Minnesota weren't worthless. They were a masterclass in adversity. He learned what it meant to be doubted. He learned how heavy a max contract feels when the city turns on you. He learned how to show up night after night when no one believes in your presence. Most players in his position labeled a bust by 24 don't get second chances. They bounce around. They become salary cap filler. They fade. But Wiggins didn't fade. He waited. He absorbed the noise, the criticism, the disappointment, and chose not to respond with tweets or talk. He responded with transformation. What he did in Golden State wasn't magic. It was the slow work, the kind that doesn't go viral, learning how to rotate on defense, improving footwork, cutting off ball, trusting the pass, diving for loose balls, buying into culture, becoming a professional in the truest sense. Wiggins didn't become a champion because he finally tried harder. He became a champion because he found a place that valued what he could be over what he wasn't. That's what the Warriors gave him. Patience, a system, a team where his role didn't require him to carry the burden of a franchise, but to contribute to a dynasty. It wasn't about 25 points per game. It was about winning possessions, winning matchups, winning games. And he locked up Luka. He wore down Tatum. He became the answer to every question Golden State threw at him, quietly, completely. And in doing so, he gave fans a new blueprint, because for every Wiggins, there are a dozen players drowning under the weight of comparisons. Not every number 1 pick is LeBron. Not every phenom becomes an MVP by 22. And that's okay. Wiggins showed us that development isn't linear. Some players need a different context, a different role, a different timeline. He reminded us that progress doesn't always scream, it builds in silence, waiting for its moment. He also shattered the myth that quiet means weak. He took the insults, the headlines, the mockery, and he didn't flinch. He didn't punch back. He stepped forward each year a little better, a little tougher, a little more refined. By the time the 2022 NBA Finals rolled around, Wiggins didn't need validation. He was playing for his teammates, not the critics. For his daughter, not the doubters. That moment, him holding his daughter after winning it all, was more than just heartwarming. It was symbolic. A man once labeled as immature, disinterested, disengaged, was now the picture of poise, purpose, and pride. Steve Kerr called him a perfect fit. Draymond Green said he was the missing piece. Steph Curry praised his defense, his growth, and his humility. The very core of the Warriors dynasty embraced him not as a project, but as a peer. Think about that. This team, championship tested, legacy obsessed, looked at Andrew Wiggins and said, "We need him." Not the Twitter version of him, not the hype or the hate. The real him. And that's the legacy Wiggins is building now. Not just a redemption arc, but a story of resilience. Not just a turnaround, but a masterclass in long-term belief. He showed us that bouncing back isn't always about revenge. Sometimes it's about fit, about timing, about maturity, about being seen for who you are, not who you were supposed to be. He showed us that falling short doesn't mean failing, because true greatness isn't built in the spotlight, it's tested in the shadows. And when the moment finally came, when the lights were brightest and the stakes highest, Andrew Wiggins wasn't just ready, he was necessary. They called him a bust. They said he was soft, overpaid, checked out. But Andrew Wiggins didn't argue. He didn't post cryptic tweets or chase headlines. He got better. He listened, he worked, and when the right team gave him the right role, he became a champion. This isn't just a comeback story, it's a reminder that patience still matters. That growth doesn't always look like a straight line, that sometimes it takes falling to find your real footing. Wiggins rewrote his legacy not with one game, but with years of quiet effort, and now he stands tall, not as a failed prospect, but as a finals hero, a defensive anchor, and a man who proved everyone wrong. If you've ever been counted out, remember Andrew Wiggins, and if this story hit home, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Because here on Bounce Back Ballers, redemption always gets the final word.